Okay, one more book review for the evening. This is Project Beta by Greg Bishop. And this is a book that I'm really torn about how to review it and how to really rank it. There's some very good information in this, but there's also a lot of I don't know of a polite way to say a lot of BS in this by Richard Doty and Bill Moore, who are interviewed at length in this by Greg Bishop. So Greg Bishop's work, he's got some other books on that I actually think are a little bit better than this. But in Project Beta, if you've followed my other books, book reviews, you're familiar with the Dulce Base book, as well as the Benowitz Papers by Krista Tilton, and I'll put links to those at the end of the video. But Project Beta covers the same subject. It's all about Paul Benowitz stumbling onto something on using his cameras and radio equipment, that he saw something on the Kirtland Air Force Base property, more specifically the Coyote Canyon area or the Manzano nuclear complex area. And he filmed it, recorded it, took this to the Air Force. The Air Force said, gee, that's interesting, and then launched this massive disinformation campaign. Now, this is where those are the facts as we know them. Now I'm going to tell you what Project Beta covers. So what Greg Bishop covers in here is he interviews Richard Doty, and Richard Doty was the original Air Force Office of Special Investigations agent that was tasked with feeding Benowitz disinformation. So real important to remember what this guy was up to, because this is not a credible source. This guy has a vested interest in maintaining this level of deception. I'm not saying that I do or do not believe that aliens were communicating with Paul Benowitz through his computer or not. That's not the point. Point is that Richard Doty was a disinformation agent of the first order. That was his job. And the real important to remember that. And also Bill Moore, who surfaces in this, Bill Moore also was a UFO author that wrote several books about, I think he wrote the book about the Philadelphia experiment, maybe? I know for sure he wrote the Roswell incident, about the Roswell crash, and that kind of became official canon. There's a lot of that original account that Bill Moore wrote that kind of became official canon for the UFO community about what happened at Roswell. So Bill Moore came out in, I believe it was the MUFON convention in Vegas in 1989, where he came out and said, oh yeah, by the way, I've been a paid informant of the Air Force, and I've been feeding disinformation into the UFO community. Sorry guys, and took off. Well, that obviously created huge waves in the UFO community. But Greg Bishop's take on this is now these guys are all telling the truth, and they're all confiding in him what exactly happened. And again, if you're willing to sift through some of the stuff in here, there is some very interesting information. But there's also some really knee-deep or deeper BS that you have to wade through to go. And some of this is, you have to, I would love to talk to Bishop in person and ask him, come on, dude, do you really believe some of this? One of the things that he says was that Richard Doty told him that they put props up on the Archuleta Mesa in Dulce, New Mexico, to fool Paul Benowitz to believe there was a base there, to attract his attention away from Kirtland Air Force Base. Now, that kind of works, except Paul Benowitz, there's pretty good evidence that he was already flying up there on his own. They didn't need to take him up there. So I think it's much more likely that Paul Benowitz was flying up there, saw some things on the ground, and knew something was up, and they had to come up with some kind of cover story for Paul to explain this. So anyway, so there's some things like that you're like, yeah, I'm not buying that. That doesn't quite make sense. I've been up to that area myself, and as you've seen from some of my other videos, the Redding Ranch is a very real place, and has some very real equipment still on it that looks to be, military style equipment, shall we say. So probably my biggest beef with this is Greg says that this was what Paul had stumbled onto was some kind of drone technology in the early 1980s. It was some kind of unmanned drone, and he kind of goes back and forth between the unmanned drone and the Starfire, or I think it's the laser lab there on the Sandia Labs that was doing the optical range, that they had some kind of deal to shoot down satellites. And he's saying that was the covert program that they were hiding, was these drone flights and the optical range, the laser range, and some of the activities there, and that's it. But again, going back to what Paul discovered, and when you really dig into that account, the NSA, even by Richard Doty's own account, the NSA was involved. So the NSA doesn't typically get involved unless something big is going on that involves the NSA. So there's definitely something bigger than just drones, because drone technology, I'm sure there was some very secret drone technology in the early 80s, but I don't think that was the be-all end-all of what Paul discovered. And in my conversations with some other authors like Christian Lambright, he saw some of the original pictures that Paul took and has some of them printed in his book, X Descending. And he was convinced this was definitely not, very pedestrian drone technology. Now I'll close with my final critique of Bishop's book is, so basically they try to diffuse any major thing and say that it's all just very terrestrial stuff. It was, and I say this as an alien agnostic. I don't believe or disbelieve there's aliens traveling to and from the planet. I have no idea. I haven't seen evidence one way or the other, so I'm withholding judgment on that. So I don't have a beef with Greg Bishop because he's not pushing the alien theory. Not at all. I'm more concerned with he dismisses a lot of other evidence that doesn't fit neatly into the Richard Doty and Bill Moore stories. So, and one of those is Myrna Hansen, who was abducted in the Cimarron, New Mexico area. She gave an account, and I don't think she was making this up because she definitely kind of disappeared off the scene, but she disclosed how she had been taken to some kind of underground facility. And Richard Doty even says that he thought that was really strange, that she knew the specifics she perfectly described like the elevator in the Monsanto nuclear complex. Now, Greg Bishop, in discussing all of this with Richard Doty, he says, well, they kind of both come to the conclusion that maybe she had some kind of remote viewing moment where she transported out of her mind into this nuclear facility and saw the elevator. And that just stretches my credulity to the breaking point. I'm not willing to go there. I think it's much more likely, if we just get down to brass tacks here, I think it is much more likely that Myrna Hansen was taken to a secret facility, either on Kirtland Air Force Base or somewhere else with similar architecture. I think that is a much more plausible scenario than a woman on a desert or on New Mexico road having a spontaneous remote viewing experience that takes her into a classified nuclear facility. So anyway, some big problems, but there's also some good information in here. He does present in the back of the book, he presents Paul's full Project Beta paper. So credit him with that. That's some pretty good information there. But again, good, but approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism. Again, not about the alien angle, but just remember that his two major sources for this book are people who have admitted to pumping a lot of disinformation into the UFO community. So, Project Beta by Greg Bishop. I think this came out in 2004.